Welcome back to Analyze on Tvone Canada. We've been talking about belief and how it relates to the process of confirmation, how it relates to the fact that there can be no contradictions in belief. Joel, can you elaborate on that, from a personal point of view, if you like?
Well, really, when you think about it, how can you believe in something that has blatant contradictions? It's like having a split personality, really. Like one of you is believing, one part of you is believing in something, and then the other part is nagging away at you, saying, well, that's not right. That doesn't sound right. That's not reasonable. So your belief has to be consistent, and it has to be in line with what we know as knowledge, what we know as fact, scientific, historical fact, social fact. So really, for me, that is what belief is. It's not a blind faith by any means. And the beauty about the Quran is that there's no inconsistencies within the Quran, and between the Quran and science and
knowledge,
knowledge,
yes.
Not just science, but knowledge as we know it.
Yeah.
And this was, beautifully exemplified and proven in Maurice Bucay's book, The Bible, Quran, and Science. But not only that, it's being constantly proven every day. All you have to do is keep in touch with what's going on in the world. Keep reading the newspaper, read book reviews. About a year ago, I read a review of the book, The Spirit Level, which was a new book of research done by some social scientists in England, that basically proved that the more inequitable society is, the worse off the society is. The standard of living is worse. Okay. So one has to be a thinking person. One has to put together connections, make connections. And you can, if you're thinking about that, you can make the connection between that research, that bit of research, and the Quran, because as we know, the Quran is foremost in advocating justice and equality. You want for your brother what you want for yourself, basically. Now, that doesn't mean that you have a Mercedes, so you want your brother to have a Mercedes. No. It means that you want a certain level of equity, yes, in society. Yes. And
and access to equity.
These riots recently in London that are happening in London, I think that the politicians have it completely off. You heard the Prime Minister come out and blame the parents of the children. Well, they're not looking at the root cause for these riots, which is basically a system which is very inequitable. And in the book, the Spirit Level, this is pointed out very well. The United States and England are two of the most inequitable countries in the world. And as a result of that, you have very poor standards of living, a lot of social problems. Okay, so feeding back to the Quran, we know that the Quran is a guidebook for us. It's an instruction manual on how to have a good life, not just a good life for ourselves, but for everybody, for the whole of society. So we know that the Quran wants us to be just, wants us to be fair. These points are reiterated throughout the whole Quran many times, and so and as I said, fair not just for ourselves, yes, but for the whole of society. So it's not like you were pointing out earlier. It's not like you're going into yourself and you're just pleasing yourself. It is doing actions outwardly which make sense, which are contributing to a better society and a better world in the end. And we can see that, as I said, the spirit level, that research is pointing out. If you do that, if you act in that sort of way, you will have a better society. You'll have a more equitable society, more just society, a happier people basically.
Yes. So what you see in your professional life, if I can put it this way, children learning in school, there can be no inconsistency between, let's say, what they learn in chemistry and what they learn in physics, for example.
Right.
As adults and as personally accountable adults, we need to take that same approach to knowledge, take that same approach to belief. Mm-hmm. And the outcome is of course more than just simply an accumulation of facts and accumulation of knowledge, but even it leads to social justice, which is better for everybody.
It depends on your knowledge. Like some people define knowledge as a very closed system, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, Osama. Like their knowledge is very closed, right? But your knowledge has to be open. Your mm-hmm. knowledge has to be open to many ideas, many facets of life.
In fact, the entire universe is interconnected,
yes.
and knowledge cannot be compartmentalized into any one thing.
Right.
What do you, Osama, from a cognitive, research standpoint, your research into behavior and cognition and how people think and function, how does a grounded belief, one that's sort of confirmed, how does that lead to, for instance, better learning outcomes? Is there any research in that area?
Oh yes, I mean, you see the frontiers now of kind of learning and learning theories is based on this notion that I think is, being familiar with the Quran, it's very Quranic. That is the responsibility. The human self, the individual, that in order for the individual to benefit from this knowledge, what they call it is the fact that, the idea that you are able to transfer what you learn to where it's applicable.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So you are able to transfer is really a conundrum that's open for research even and as we speak, but these new notions of cognitive science, again, of the notions of what you call it usually constructivism, but of course constructivism sometimes I think is also have this extremist views, the left and to the right, but the basic notion of constructivism is that the individual has to individually build his or her own knowledge. It has the responsibility of doing that. As it's interacting with the world, it is not like the individual is not like a sponge, as I say, that you pour some water in it and that's it. But no, it is rather a knowledge building process inside. So if you do not build that conceptual structure inside you, by actually you managing to build it and inquire about the structure piece to piece as you are putting it together, it makes sense to say that you cannot transfer that knowledge.
Right, and so it is not knowledge that has any productive purpose, and perhaps is not even verifiable.
That's why there is this.
And so coming back to belief then, Joel, you were talking about belief. The belief in the Quran, belief in Islam, is an outcome of a thinking process. You were talking about a thinking process. Yeah. How is that, what has been your personal experience with respect to that?
Well, just as I said, that without that, it has to make sense.
Yes.
It has to be reasonable. And the Quran says many times that you have to use your reason. Mm-hmm. And I picked up that it was the use of the word reason was only a few times. I thought it was only a few times, but Osama was pointing out to me earlier that because he reads it, of course, in the original Arabic, there are many words that use the word reason in different forms and variations.
Different aspects of reason. Yeah.
Different aspects. So the use of reason is, of course, appeals to me. And I said you cannot, as I said before, you can't be a split personality. You can't believe on one side and just sort of on the other side think, well, this doesn't make sense, or this doesn't make sense. You have to be a whole person. You have to be a complete person. So you have to be, what Allah is instructing us has to make sense for us. And we're fasting now in Ramadan. We wouldn't do it if it didn't make sense to us.
Yes.
And it makes a lot of sense. Medically it makes sense. Spiritually it makes sense. So you know, it has to make sense for us in order for us to do it.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. And did that attract you to Islam? Was that one of the components that attracted you to Islam?
Well, I think what originally attracted me to Islam was the idea that because I was coming from a Roman Catholic background, what originally attracted me to this Islam was that Jesus, peace be upon him, was not the Son of God, but was a prophet and was one of a long line of prophets. Mm-hmm. And that made sense. Mm-hmm. Coming back to reason,
yes, right.
that made sense to me. Because, you know, God just can't direct things on his own. God needs prophets, right? In order to get the message across to people, he needs prophets. And
human beings like us.
Human beings like us, yes. who are fallible like us as well. And so that's what attracted me to Islam. That's what made sense to me. And when the person who first introduced me to Islam said, "There's no God but one God," mm-hmm. and Jesus and the others are prophets of that God, then that really grabbed me.
It resonated with you.
It resonated, yes.
And then the outcome then, the process of, not just the process of belief, but the outcome of belief in Islam, the idea of security, the idea of peace, tranquility, the idea that, you know, that when you understand something and you have verified it and you have confirmed it, right. you have that peace.
You have that peace.
Yes, there's no conflicts. There are not two persons, as you said, within yourself who are fighting with each other.
Right, which is submission also.
Yeah.
Peace is the same as submission, which is, as I was commenting earlier, we in the West, we don't understand the concept of submission, and I think that needs to be explained.
Yeah.
That's true.
You know.
And indeed, that's probably going to take a whole show by itself. You've been watching Analyse on Tvone Canada. With me in the studio have been Osama Ghanim, who's a researcher and a PhD candidate at OISE, and Joel Winter, who's a teacher in the Peel Board of Education and has been a long list of schools. We've been talking about so many fascinating aspects of Islam, reason, verification, evidence, and undoubtedly we will be talking more about this in future shows. We want your feedback. Get in touch with us, please, at any of the coordinates that you see on your screen in front of you. And we want to get your feedback on the topics that we cover, as well as future topics that you'd like us to cover. In the meantime, I've been your host, Anis Munshi. Keep thinking.